Well, it's been a while since I've done this, and I'm doing this inside of a car here, and the reason's not because of the weather, because this time of year it's actually weather is actually somewhat pleasant outside. It's I think today's March the 8th, but it's on a Wednesday, and it's about 5:45 Eastern time when I'm doing this. And I would, like I said, the reason I'm not outside has got nothing to do with the weather. Weather would be fine if that's all I had to deal with out there. But unfortunately, the weather's not only good for me, it's good for bugs. And other things I can deal with, but bugs flying around you all the time. And you may remember one video I did, there was a bunch of them, and I was constantly doing this, trying to get them away from me. And so I'm not wanting to have to do that anymore. It's just it got real annoying, very distracting trying to do something like that. And so I do it inside here, but I am out in the woods, kind of. I'll actually let me just sort of show you where I'm at here. You can see this is a if I can zoom in on it here. That's campground area. That's part of the car there, so we can move on to the other side. That's where people can put a tent. There's one over there. There's one right there, and you can see where the fireplaces are as well. Yep, back out. So, and you can see the trees back through there. Over here, there's a big tree that's fallen down. And as of right now, there's not leaves are not on the back on the trees yet, but I expect that'll be within the next month or so, maybe even before the end of this month, that we will have leaves on the trees, and it'll be that time of year again. It won't be so bad with the bugs if I'm out walking. But if I'm standing still doing it, they're going to gather around. If I'm out walking, it's not quite as bad, but standing still is when they get a chance to gather around. The last one of these videos I did, well, I've done a couple since then, but the last one I did back in just before Christmas, I think it was, and that's been 2.5 months, I guess. So it's been a while since I've done one of these. I've just haven't done it. And just every once in a while, I'll go a little while without doing one. So I didn't forget about doing it. It's just, every once in a while, I say I'll get out of the mood, for lack of a better way of saying it, to do it. And I have been up here in this same area walking a lot. But at any rate, I haven't done the video. But the last one I did, because I've been doing a series of videos and things that I believe. The last one I did on that was on the issue of creation, and read from Genesis 1, and I was talking a little bit about in there that some of the different ways to interpret the first verse of Genesis. And one of the things I pointed out was that we cannot say strictly there's just not enough information given in Genesis to support the idea of creation being created out of nothing, because there's for various reasons, if you want to go back and watch that video. But the main thing that that Moses is conveying in the book of Genesis, in the first chapter, the first couple of chapters, is the fact that the created world that we see is just that, the created world. It has a creator. The sun, the moon, the stars, all the animals that creep, the creeping animals, he says, the cattle of the field. Remember, these were things, and the fish of the sea, for that matter as well, the birds of the air. These were things that people around Israel worshipped. So Moses in what he's saying in those verses, under inspiration, of course, is that these things have a creator. The birds, the cattle. Remember, Israel was worshiping the calf in the wilderness, as well as their neighbors obviously were. but to point out all these things, including the astronomical bodies, sun, moon, and stars, and so forth, all have a creator. That whereas the Canaanites and Babylonians and others were worshiping these things actually have something behind them that's actually worthy of our worship. So the issue that being addressed by Moses here, and what Israel had to deal with, but like a better way of saying it, the cultural context they found themselves in, was one that worshipped these things. And the question was not about whether these things were created out of nothing or not. But there are some parts in the New Testament that do lend more credence to the idea of things being created out of nothing. And I want to look at one of those this evening for a few moments here. It's in the book of Colossians, Paul's epistle to the Colossians. And it's in Colossians chapter 1, and I'll start at verse 15. And Paul says who, and he's talking about Jesus here. I'll read verse 14 just to show that. It says, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created, that are in heaven, and that are in earth, and that are visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. That's Colossians 1:14 through verse 17 that I was reading there. He says he created all things, whether they be things visible or invisible, or we might say things that are material or immaterial. Now, there was a belief in the New Testament time among some, it's part of what we later would call Gnosticism, was that there were two gods. There was the one God who was the God of the Spirit. He was the good God. And then there was the evil God who was the God of matter. And he was the one who created the material world. And sort of the idea was that we wanted to be delivered from the material world somehow. Was, you wanted to stop thinking about all the things of this material world and just, focus on things that were spiritual, because the spirit was good and matter was evil. And that this evil God is the one that created the material world. They even would say that was the God of the Hebrew Scriptures, or what we call the Old Testament, that this was the evil God, and that Jesus was the Son of the good God, the God of Spirit, and he came to liberate us from the material world. And some even said that Jesus did not have a physical body, because the body was evil, it was matter. So Jesus didn't have a physical body, which is why in many places in the New Testament it goes to great lengths to point that out, that he did indeed have a physical body. Well, I'm not going to get into that at the moment, but just to say that was part of what Paul, the world in which they were in, was people that held to that belief that there was a good God and an evil God, and the evil God was the one who created these things. And the good God created things of the Spirit, the angels, our souls, and all those sort of things that we have. So there was the contestation between these two gods. So Paul here says, Jesus being the image of the invisible God, he says the firstborn of every creature, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth. There's that, the idea of the physical and the spiritual there, the idea of in heaven and on earth. But he also says visible and invisible. Things that are visible, those would be the things that we would call matter. The trees, I'm looking around here, is why the first thing that came to mind, but humans, animals, the dirt, the rivers, the oceans, all those things that you could see, these are the things that were visible, and God created that, as well as the things that were invisible. the human soul, angels, those sort of things, spirit world. He created both. In other words, he created all of these things, both the matter and the things that are spirit, or the material and immaterial, as we often will call it. So we have that Jesus was the one who created all of these things. This also goes into the idea of the deity of Christ. Later on in some of the videos, I'll talk about the person and work of Jesus Christ, but just sort of let us see where that's going to end up at about the deity of Christ. But you can see here that he creates all things, both the visible and the invisible, things that are of spirit, things that are matter. And it says he creates all things. So anything that's visible, and anything, if there was any type of pre-existent matter, that would be something that would be visible. And he created it. So there we have more in these verses here, more of a confirmation of what we would call creation out of nothing. That he created from nothing. But there's one other verse too that I want to look at, and it's in Hebrews chapter 11, what we commonly refer to as the faith chapter, as it mentions that, and obviously in quite a few verses. But verse 3, it says, "Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear." Now the word there for worlds is not the word that we usually use for the world or for the heavens, the universe, anything of that nature that's spoken of in the New Testament. There's a different Greek word. The word that's used there is the same word that's usually translated age. Sometimes it's translated world, but we use it. We'll use that word as well. We talk about the ancient world and the modern world. We're not talking about two different planets. We're talking about time periods. And that's the idea of what it means. It's the word where we get the word eon from. The Greek word we get the word eon from. It speaks of a period of time. So it says that the eons, if you will, or the ages, were framed by the word of God. The idea here is that time was created by him. That God is the, shall we say, the author, the creator of time. God himself is eternal. He is atemporal, was to use a fancy word, or to say it another way, he is timeless. He exists outside of time. And everything that we have here, as we understand it in this world, functions in time. The idea of time and matter, and actually time, matter, space, and energy, and all those things function as one. And that's some sort of a scientific idea as well. But, time, it only, makes sense in the material world. So if he created time, it would go as well that he created matter also. And it says in there, this next thing says, "So that the things which are seen were not made out of things which do appear." In other words, things that are visible. So the things in this earth, the physical things of this world, were not made from things that are themselves physical, but are things that are not physical, spoken by the Word of God, that He made it. So I wanted to just kind of review and talk a little bit about that, about the creation as well. That creation does, the New Testament, while the Old Testament doesn't stress that, the New Testament talks a bit more about it, that all things were created through the person of Jesus Christ, actually, as the second, we would call, as we sometimes would refer as the second person of the Trinity. But I would say maybe that's even wrong to say, because not the second person of the Trinity, but it was before his incarnation, before he came to earth, he was the agent of creation, and he created all things, both things that are material and things that are spiritual. So, just wanted to talk about that a little bit more about creation, and so I'm maybe done and talking about that, I may do something more about it. But then we'll move on to some other things as well. Well, I'm glad to be back and doing some of these, and I hope to do some more. I may have to do more of them indoor because of the presence of animals around, little flying ones, and I can even see some of them outside right now. But I hope to do some videos outside, like some hiking videos. Maybe I can do some of this. Usually when I'm doing them, you'll see me like this when I'm being still. Maybe I'll do some of them while I am hiking as well. And, do a few other things in there as well. So, but I'm glad to have gotten the chance to do this again today. Well, it's 6 o'clock my time now in the Eastern time zone. It's Wednesday night, and I'm be at church here in about a little bit less than an hour, which is I go to church just down the road from where I'm at right here. So, hope everybody has a blessed day and has enjoyed this. And like I say, I hope to get to do this more very soon. All right. Well, again, everybody have a blessed day. Goodbye, and talk to you later.